Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, man.
Thanks for willing to do this.
Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for being patient. It was a busy couple months.
Oh yeah, no problem. I can try and maybe talk about roles that you hadn't really talked about as much too.
Sure, whatever you'd like. It's your interview.
Well, the first thing I wanted to ask was when you did get to LA, do you remember how you got into SAG?
So I actually got into SAG before I got to LA.
Oh, okay.
Um, I started out as a voice actor in Virginia. I was working there. I had still working for the government at that point. Discovered it out there, and then about maybe like 8 to 10 months in, I booked a union commercial campaign for a university, and now I can't remember what university it was. But that's what got me into SAG. So I filed paperwork for SAG when I was out in Virginia, and I picked it up there.
Oh, okay. So when you did get to LA, what was the new kind of professional job that you had?
Do you mean like outside of voiceover?
Yeah, just in general.
Nope, I became a full-time voice actor when I was in Virginia, probably around the end October of 2014-ish. I think I quit my job and went full-time. And then after that, it was kind of a decision like, do we want to move near family, or do we want to go to LA so I can kind of hunt the bigger, more fun jobs, animation and stuff like that. So the decision was made that I moved to LA.
And was I guess was one of the first video games you did Soul Hunters?
Soul Hunters sounds like, what was the role? Do you have the role in front of you?
Yeah, Volko.
Volko. Okay. So that was, I don't know if that was like one of the first video games I did, but it was certainly early. Because that wasn't, I didn't pick that up from an agent. I didn't pick that up from anywhere. It was like some kind of like really random casting. Yeah, that's old stuff. I don't know if it was the first, but it's certainly old.
Okay. What about with Black Desert Online?
Black Desert Online is interesting. I picked that up in 2017 is when I started recording
Oh,
that. I know the game is older than that, correct?
mhm.
I wasn't familiar with the game at all. And they picked me up as part of like, well, I believe there's Black Desert and then there's Black Desert Online. I'm
Right.
not sure. It's very confusing. And they picked me up for Black Desert Online to play like kind of their big bad. Man, how did I get that job? I don't even remember. 2017, it was a long time ago, man. Either that may have come through my agent, or it may have been because I had a relationship with the studio that was recording it. I had done several projects for them, so.
And was one of your first anime experiences in Hunter x Hunter?
My first anime experience, from what I recall, was, I think it was Durarara X2. I
Okay.
think I think that was the first thing I did, and that was just what we call Walla. If you're familiar with the term, it was basically like background stuff. After that, I think the first like go in and dub to beeps was a couple of side characters in God Eater.
Okay.
I think that's where it was my first anime. That's
And I
that's
kind
2015, 2016 for sure.
yeah. And I've kind of found that everybody has different answers as to how they took to dubbing. Was it difficult for you to get used to?
I don't know. I think I grew up as a musician, so like there's a rhythm to it, and you have to understand like there's a mental aspect to understanding. Okay, this thing I just heard feels to be about this length of time. I'm going to repeat that length of time in my brain. And I don't know, I seem to have a pretty easy time with it. I would attribute it to being a musician just from that timing and rhythm perspective. And also being able to like when you're dubbing, you get three beeps and then you talk. It's beep, 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 talk. So like being able to establish that rhythm in my head, okay, this is the beats per minute, talk. It's just yeah. My timing is usually pretty good.
And I would think too one of your earlier characters was Eliza in Gundam Iron Blooded Orphans.
Yeah, that may have been my first named character, like that wasn't some, like rando man number 8. And yeah, I was there for the whole series. I think that was the first time that the studio that recorded that is Bang Zoom.
Great.
They have this habit of bringing me in and killing me. So I think that was the first time they killed my character. And also they hired me several times, weirdly, as like an intelligence officer, which was my job in the Air Force. And I think they hired me as an intelligence officer character 3 times, and I think they killed me each time.
Oh. And this was outside of that, but I did think it was interesting that you got to be part of some kind of Rudolph ride.
That was old.
Okay.
Now, that may have been before I moved to LA. It was a fun little thing because I was a huge fan. Well, I mean, like I grew up with the Rudolph claymation, right? Are you familiar?
Yeah.
Have you seen it? Okay, so it's a classic Christmas movie. And I grew up with it and watching it over and over and over again. And I was super familiar with all the voices. Like I felt like I could nail several of them. But they only ended up hiring me for like some like bully, like little bully. I have one line that's like nice schnoz talking to Rudolph and stuff like that. So it was neat. I don't know if that display is still around, but it was like a 4D experience kind of celebrating that claymation. I think it was somewhere in California. I can't remember where it was. I never got a chance to visit it, and I'm fairly certain it's probably not there anymore, but I'm not totally sure.
Okay. Do you have a bucket list of franchises that you would like to be a part of?
Well, sure. I would love to be main cast of a Persona game. That'd be really cool. I would love to work on a original IP from Naughty Dog, a la like Uncharted / Last of Us. They get a great way of telling stories, and I'd love to be a part of that. I've been a part of several entries in the Final Fantasy franchise in smaller capacities, but I'd love to be in a main numbered Final Fantasy. That'd be pretty cool. I was a huge Final Fantasy fan growing up. I'd say those are some bigger bucket list.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And for those who aren't familiar about how you played Fox McCloud in the Starfox short, what's the story about that?
You know, weirdly, that casting came to me in like a kind of roundabout way. It was posted somewhere online and totally obfuscated, like no idea what it was. And there was like reference files that I didn't recognize, which surprised me because I was a big, Starfox player. Like I love Starfox 64. I learned later that like a lot of the files that they posted were basically sound clips from their previous games. And I believe I auditioned for a couple, and this was like right when I got to LA. I must have auditioned for it late November ish of 2015. I mean, this is like immediately afterwards. And they booked me right away. And I remember getting the contract. I remember it being strange because typically when you book off casting websites or you're doing like corporate stuff that's not super sexy, it's just a very casual, guy sends you an email, a company sends you an email. Hey, we need this VO. Here's the direction. Send us a take, send us 2 takes, and then we'll let you know if it's good. But with this one, some intermediary company reached out and was like, hey, we have a contract and a non-disclosure agreement for him. I was like, this is like a casting website. This is not like, wasn't agented. It wasn't anything like that. And I was like, this is weird. So I get the NDA and it's got Nintendo's name on it. And I'm like, what? It was just really bizarre. And afterwards I was like, hey, what is this? And what am I doing? And they're like, oh yeah, you're Fox McCloud in the Starfox anime. And I actually jumped up off the couch and was like yelling. I got super excited. Yeah, it was a cool moment. I totally unexpected, very not a traditional way to get any kind of job. I don't know why they cast it that way, but I'm glad they did. It was cool.
Mm-hmm. How could you personally relate to Fox at all as a character?
Well, I mean, Fox is a pilot in the military. I was in the military, and I am a pilot, although I did not do those 2 things simultaneously. A leader, a go-getter. He's a little bit more of a maverick than I am, but yeah, I think he was easy shoes for me to step into.
And do you think with characters you played so far that you still had the most affinity with Claude?
I don't know if I would say I had the most affinity with Claude out of all the characters I've played. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Like Fox was a version of me, and so was Achilles from Fate Apocrypha. So was Claude. Those are all like versions of me. But which one was closest to like the bullseye? I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I'd have to think about it. I have to like look through my list of credits and see like which one was basically like, okay, you're just hiring Joe.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is the case so far throughout your whole career where you've had to get the darkest emotional headspace for voiceover?
Okay, so the darkest emotional headspace I ever got in was actually dubbing a Korean movie called False False City, Fabricated City. It was Fabricated City, right? Huge Korean movie that they dubbed into English, and I played the lead character who's a young gamer who basically gets framed for murder. He goes to prison and experiences like all kinds of psychological trauma that ultimately, not ultimately, I mean, it's some part through the movie, I would say that the nadir of his character arc is he attempts to kill himself. He's in isolation. He attempts to kill himself by chewing through his own wrist. That was a dark place. And that was like right after that, or either right before that, his mom dies and he has this like dream where his mom's ghost is there. Like that was awful. That was an awful, I mean, it was powerful, but it was an awful experience, just like being in that headspace.
Mm-hmm. Has there been a case with like anime or JRPGs where you've had to get pretty far yet, or?
JRPG and anime. Well, okay, you can't include anime in this, but I would say most JRPGs tend to float around the T for teens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there's not many rated M JRPGs. There's some, and they take themes there, but I think in general, nothing has gotten as dark as that particular movie.
I guess would it be like Claude's death stuff? That was the darkest you had to go for him.
For him, yeah, sure. He doesn't really like let stuff get to him.
Right.
So even when like straits are pretty dire all throughout Three Houses, um, it's he's okay with it. He kind of rolls with the punches. So I wouldn't say I really had to dip into that space with Claude hardly at all because it just didn't affect him.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a single favorite support? If you could pick one.
I really enjoyed his and Hilda's and his and Lysithia's. I really enjoyed both of them. I think Lysithia's probably in particular because it kind of went from that, you know, like almost like infantilizing her
Mm-hmm.
and just being kind of a jerk to seeing her eye to eye and treating her as an equal. It was a good maturation arc for Claude, I think.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's interesting how many like unique dialogue situations there are with him and Edelgard too.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. I think Claude sees Edelgar's point, but just maybe is like maybe don't do it that way. You know, you're doing the wrong things for the right reasons. Like I can get behind that, but you know, let's maybe not burn it down as we do it.
Mm-hmm. What about with Canis and Jamke? Who do you think you have more affinity with them?
I'll be completely frank. I remember almost nothing about either of those characters.
Okay.
That was like, God, it was probably less than a 30-minute session in 2017, 2016. I don't know. Like, I remember that Canis is a magic dude and Jamke has a bow. That's about as far as I can go with either. And there's like, you know, with Fire Emblem Heroes, especially if you don't have, if they're not coming in, although one of them was from another franchise, wasn't he? Like a character that had never had a voice but was.
Yeah.
I have no idea what their backgrounds were. I went in, we tried some things out. It was like one of the quickest sessions. And then I went home. And so like I have no idea. I don't even know either of their last names, if they have a last name. And honestly, like a lot of video game voiceover is like that. If you're not playing like a lead role or at least a strong supporting role, many times you don't have any details about the character. You try to find a voice that you think fits their situation or their role or whatever, and then you move on.
Kind of related to that, what do you think is the case where you've had to alter your voice the most significantly so far or something.
Those are the most, honestly, like they're sometimes the most fun. What did they change his name to? Because it was Oingo and then it was Zenyatta in JoJo's. That was weird. Like I picked like a strange voice for that. Hunter x Hunter, I was Bloster the lobster, which is a strange voice. Cells at Work, I was a bacteria that causes diarrhea, and he was wild. Like he was all over the place. Like it was very, very strange. That was a fun session. And then I did a character for Legends of Runeterra, which is the competitive card game by Riot, League of Legends. And I did this like underwater fish thing. And it was really odd. And then when they like did the effects and post processing, it doesn't sound like me at all. It's pretty cool.
Most recently, get to be the big bad in Tales of Arise.
Yeah, Volron was fun. I love playing villains. I don't get to do it very often because my voice tends to be very like bright and chipper. And when people think of me, I think a lot of times they think protagonist, or at the very least, like, you know, side guy, like the supportive side guy. So I don't get to play villains a whole lot, but when I do, it's fun because a lot of times like they get to chew the scenery. You know, like they really dig in. You get to break some acting conventions because you're just evil. Like you don't have to be grounded because you're not. It's fun. I enjoyed Voron a lot.
Do you think that you have a personal preference for working on darker opposed to comedic?
No, I think it's sort of nice to have variety. You know what I mean? If I was always playing villains, as an actor, you never only want to play one thing, right? It's just A, it gets boring, and B, you start to get pigeonholed. People are like, oh, that's the guy that does blah blah blah. That's the guy that does blah blah blah, and it can be hard to break out of that mold. So variety is nice. I wouldn't say that I prefer one over the other. It's easier. I would say it's easier for me to step into a comedic role than a villain role, depending on how the villain is written, because most, particularly like JRPG, anime, when you write a villain, I don't want to use the word cliche because it sounds derogatory, but there's an archetype that goes with villains, and they're always down here and evil, and that's just not really where like I sit normally. So unless you have like a unique villain like the bacteria, where you can kind of go a little crazy, that yeah, I like the crazy villains are easier for me to play than the deep, dark, brooding villains. You know what I mean?
What about with Omokage in the Hunter x Hunter movie?
Omokage was cool because he was crazy, right? He wasn't so mustache twirly down in the gravel. His voice, he was just nuts. He was nuts, and he was fun. I mean, like the guy made a hobby out of like stealing people's eyes. Like you can't get too much crazier than that. So yeah, he's fun.
I'm sure it had to be fun being part of Kakegurui too, Ibara.
Yeah, Ibarra was cool. I had no real sense of that series, or what it was about, but it was one of those situations where you realize that, like, man, you can make an anime about just about anything, and it's going to be dramatic, right? But we're talking about like people betting on coin flips for an entire season. You get Food Wars, which is about cooking, and it still is engaging. And they just find these really bizarre ways to raise the stakes on like everything from ice skating to chopping an onion. That was just one of those experiences where I was like, this is a whole series about a school for gambling. What a weird concept, especially since they're like so young. But yeah, it was cool. Just another example of like that. You can make an anime about anything. Anything. Is there a knitting anime? I bet it is. And if there's not, there will be.
You tend to consume a lot of the things that you're a part of then?
Almost none.
Okay.
You know, it's fun to see what you've done. For games in particular, like I'm a gamer, if I don't enjoy that type of game, you know, it's nothing against the game itself or like the development of the game, but like I just don't play it. Lost Ark just came out, and I was a bunch of voices in that, but it's not really my kind of game. You know, like I won't go consume it just to hear my voice. I don't know that I watched any of the anime I was in other than Fate Apocrypha. And of course, like I streamed Fire Emblem,
Yeah.
and I played a little bit of Tales of Arise, but also like you get in this situation where uh, you kind of like know everybody in the cast, and it just kind of like dissociates you from the story repeatedly,
Mhm.
because they're like, oh, that's Erica, or like, oh, that's Billy, and it's just like you just hear them, you stop hearing the characters, which can be difficult if for a story-driven game.
I think this going back to your roles, I think probably my personal favorite one of yours is Hizamaru in Touken Ranbu.
Oh yeah, what made him so special for you? Because he was pretty. I would say he's I don't want to say generic, but he didn't scream out to me as something particularly unique.
I just have a soft spot for really well done anime that's set in feudal Japan with like pretty male characters, I guess. So
Yeah, hey, whatever. There's nothing wrong with a pretty boy.
yeah.
He was that for sure.
Mhm. And I know this would also be a pretty recent Kazutora Tokyo Avengers.
Yeah, an interesting thing. Like I haven't really done a whole lot of dubbing in the last couple of years, and then that studio reached out and was like, "Hey, we want to cast you as this particular character," and I was like, "Okay, sure." And it turned out that I ended up working with a guy that I had worked with for years on a project called Mr. Love, which was an otome game. Cool guy, cool director, cool engineer, and so it was fun to kind of get back in the booth with him again. Um, Again, you really can make an anime about everything. Like if kids can be in a gambling school, then I guess kids can run gangs. Like that, which I guess isn't too far from the truth from like a statistical criminal gang activity perspective. It's mostly kids, but these were young kids. Like
Mhm.
so I don't know, it was intense. Kazutora had some issues. That dude needs therapy. Like that dude needs a lot of therapy. But yeah, playing an unhinged gang member. There you go.
This is obvious too, I'm sure, but even with how like evil a character is, you always find something that you can relate to them with.
Yeah, if you, I say this a lot in conversations about storytelling, but no one is the villain in their own story, right? And if you write a character well, if you write a villain well, we're beyond these whole mustache twirling, pure evil Sauron kind of villains, right? Sauron doesn't play anymore. It's just who cares about him? There's this evil presence that wants bad things to happen. That doesn't jive anymore with our sort of social psyche.
Mhm.
We need characters with depth because everybody has perspective. So if you can't find something to latch onto where you could be like, you know what, maybe this person is right in their own mind, right? Like you have to establish and understand that perspective. So if you can't, I don't think you're playing that character ineffectively. I mean, of course, you could get handed a character that isn't written effectively, but yeah, I think it's super important, especially with villains, to find something to make them sympathetic.
Mhm. Since you brought it up too, I was going to ask what your experience was on Mr. Love as Gavin.
It was a long-standing game that we had a good time on. With otome games, there's a certain element of like cheesiness that you have to accept, right? When you write these sorts of games and when you act, because I've done a couple, and you have to accept that it's just like a little on the weird side. It's just a little odd. Like characters say things, and you're like, this is real. This is like season one Bachelor level of like interaction between people. Like, is this it's so, it's a, they're games of hyperbole, if that makes sense, right? Like no one acts in the center. Everybody's on the edges. You've got these like crazy villain type people who are like in toxic abusive relationships, and you have people that are like always doing the right thing, candles on your birthday, and like it's just so once you kind of settle into that, you can have fun with it. You can have fun with the fact that like you understand that this is at its face somewhat ridiculous.
Mhm.
And then you kind of settle in, and they become fun after that. So
Is there much of a story about getting involved with Pokemon Masters?
none at all. I think a lot of people was like, oh, what's the big story between X Roll? I get asked that about Claude all the time, and it's like the story was a studio sent me an audition. I sent them an MP3, and they booked me. End of story. Same thing with Pokemon Masters. Actually, did I audition for Silver? I don't know that I did.
Oh,
I think sometimes games, either you have a good relationship with the studio, or there's just simply dozens and dozens of roles they have to cast, so they have their roster and they're like, okay, I know Joe can do this, he can do this, bring him in for these. So that it might have been the case there. I don't recall auditioning for Pokemon Masters, but I could be totally wrong.
okay. And I know it's of course more rare in anime to have multiple roles or play against yourself, but I know you got to have a number of roles in One Punch Man.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had a situation where I talked to myself. I mean, I've done that many times in both games and animation. But you're right. I don't think I've ever done that in anime, to my recollection. I don't even remember who I put. Was it did I play Roach? Some kind of Roach guy?
Yeah, Roach and Saturn Man. And,
Yeah, I don't think they were in the same scene or even in the same episode.
yeah,
Were they?
no.
So yeah, again, those were like one-off, real short sessions. They didn't have a lot going on, so I probably spent less than an hour in the booth for each of them.
You've been playing Kurt Vander for a while too.
Kurt's fun. Kurt is like has like no sense of fun, which is it's fun to lean into that, and just like he's I wouldn't even call him like the straight man. And I say that like from a storytelling perspective, where like your straight man is that like everyone around this person is insane, and then you have the straight man that's like everyone around me is insane. He's not even that, because in his own way he's also like a little goofy. He just takes everything way too seriously. But yeah, he's a fun character to play, and he's very endearing in that way, that he just doesn't really like break character very often. But when he does, it's a fun payoff.
I haven't really seen you talk a whole lot about Psyche Kusuke.
I don't remember a lot about that role at all. Again, I think it was maybe one session, maybe two sessions. Because I played Psyche's brother, right? Like that's his older brother. I don't remember anything about that. Like I really don't.
Oh yeah, this would be more relatively recent too, with Phantasy Star Online.
Phantasy Star Online was cool. I didn't play a whole lot of like other Phantasy Star games, because they went back to like the Sega Genesis, right?
Yeah.
I think I might have tried them. There was a period in time where I was sort of investigating a bunch of old RPGs, and I think I might have played Phantasy Star way back when. But it was cool. Huey, the character, is he's just loud and obnoxious. I don't get to do a lot of those, so that was kind of fun. Like I feel like he's always just like shouting in everybody's face. He's that like annoying surfer dude who has no volume control and no like filter, but is unendingly positive. Just like always very ready to like encourage everyone. So yeah, he's fun. He's a fun guy.
Which like JRPGs are you personally a fan of, like before getting into voiceover?
Huge Final Fantasy fan. I mean, I played the Final Fantasy IV was probably like the first video game RPG I ever played when I was like 7. Secret of Mana, Persona, I got introduced to in like 2009-ish. That was awesome. I started with Persona 3. Those are probably my biggest, the games that I enjoy the most. Yeah, for sure.
I know with anime, you said that your favorites are Trigun and Death Note.
Yeah, those are masterpieces. Like I don't watch a lot of anime too much anymore, but they are masterpieces in storytelling. Like you could have classes on both of them, and I think even like if you can separate the whole like anime stigma from like a bunch of turn up your nose critics who are like, this is not real art. They're masterpieces in storytelling, particularly Death Note. I think it's an incredible story.
I did personally think it was cool that I've seen you post about Escaflowne a lot too.
Yeah, but I had an incident. I was listening to the Escaflowne soundtrack a couple days ago, and that's I think why I posted it. But I can't remember posting too much before that. Escaflowne was an anime I saw when I was in high school, and I enjoyed the movie as well. And I think that was one of the first times I got introduced to Yoko Kanno as a composer. Though I didn't know that she had done it for quite a while. I think until after I understood, like, okay, Cowboy Bebop, Yoko Kanno, and then I realized that Yoko Kanno had done my favorite soundtracks for tons of other things, and that was a fun discovery, because I had been listening to the soundtracks of like Ghost in the Shell and Escaflowne and all that stuff, and then didn't realize it was all the same person.
What inspired you to do the like saxophone soundtrack for the Fire Emblem Three Houses?
I have always been a huge fan of video game music. They were the first CDs I ever bought with my own money. It was like the Final Fantasy VI soundtrack, like straight from like call 1-800 Square Enix and order it. Back in like 2011-ish, I got introduced to Overclock Remix, which is a website that full of basically music nerds that like to take video game music and reimagine them. Ended up working on like somewhere between 30 and 40 tracks on the website, a couple of albums. Ended up jumping on staff as a workshop moderator, and then recently came on as a judge, because there's an evaluation system to actually have music posted on the site. So my history with video game music is longer than my history in just about anything. I started listening to it when I was 8, 9. I don't know, and I just loved it, and I loved reimagining it. And I think that I got the idea after doing some work. I didn't realize, like, although I had listened to a lot of Overclock Remix, I didn't realize there was like this whole litany of people who make music videos and stuff like that to remix video game music. And then I got introduced to like Insane in the Rain, Family Jewels, did my God Shattering Star collaboration with him. And so like I didn't want to duplicate. I thought it would be a fun idea, but I didn't want to duplicate what a bunch of other people were doing, right? Like, I'm not a metal guy. I could do a metal remix. It wouldn't be very good. It wouldn't be anywhere near as good as Jules. Funky jazz, quintet stuff. Again, like Carlos he's got the corner of the market on that. Like, I didn't want to mimic anybody. So I was like, well, what the hell do I do that nobody else does? And then I look behind me and I've got 4 saxophones on the wall. And it's like, okay, what if I just made a sax quartet or sax quintet arrangement of this stuff? And so I made a pilot track with Dylan, my arranger, and Ro, my video editor, and then pitched it to the world, and we got a great response. So we're like, we're almost halfway through the tracks on the album. The most grueling part is going to be making music videos for them. But the core of the music is pumping ahead at a great pace. So actually probably faster than I thought it was going to, and we're starting on the rewards and stuff like that. So I feel like we're really on pace for that. But yeah, it's a cool project. I'm excited to finish it.
Yeah, it was funny back when I talked to Ben Lepley. He said that he kind of like made you think that he was like, yeah, he could play saxophone because of his profile picture.
He's got the profile picture, and I actually was like, hey, you want to play on the album? He's like, I don't play sax, and I was like, you liar. But Hackney's gonna play, so
okay. This is going back to, I think most recently, one of the things that you get to be part of is Phantom Breaker.
Yeah, Phantom Breaker Omnia was a kind of like an out of left field game. I think I auditioned for that one. I think I did. And then they brought me in for sort of like this arrogant, wispy guy, Infinity, right? That game's coming out real soon. I'm not too much of like a fighting game aficionado, but I don't know. People seem excited about it, so it'll be neat to see when it gets released. And
with Rune Factory 5 as well.
Yeah, Rune Factory is another franchise that people freaked out about, but I had never heard of. It just wasn't on my radar. And I guess, like, obviously there's been at least 4 other Rune Factories, if we're on 5, but I had never heard of them. I have no idea, like, the concept of the game. I'm excited. It comes out in, like, 2 weeks, 3 weeks-ish. I think March 22nd. I can't remember. But yeah, it'll be cool. I actually think I am going to check that one out and see what it's all about, because people seem really excited about it. And I had basically never heard of Rune Factory.
What about with Shadowverse?
Shadowverse is probably the role I've held for the longest in my entire career. I believe I auditioned for it before I moved to LA. Like, it was right on the cusp. I must have gotten it mid 2015 and then auditioned and then moved. And then they cast me after I got here. So I think that was actually one of the first games I actually went into an LA studio to record. That's become kind of like an interesting side story of my voiceover career, because Psy Games, the company that makes it, in a lot of ways kind of leaned on me as like a brand ambassador. We got enthusiastic about the game. I've done tournaments and events and stuff like that, and now we stream it together every week, and it's become a cool community of people. I've never really gotten into any kind of competitive card game, and now I'm almost master rank, like the highest rank outside of tournaments you can get from playing the game. I play it way too much, and we've got more cooking in the books about fun stuff we're going to do about Shadowverse. Shadowverse is insanely popular in Japan. Like it kicks the crap out of like Hearthstone and Magic in Japan. So like we're kind of slowly growing our US fan base, and I think people are really responding to it because it's a fun game. It's always updating, it's always fresh, and the community is fun.
Mm-hmm. It is kind of interesting too, because in terms of physical appearance, like Kai isn't the character you would think that you would necessarily play.
No, Kai was cool. So now you're talking about Shadowverse Champions Battle, which is a game about a game. So Kai was fun because he's just this like very little, I'm a genius among geniuses, which isn't, it's very within my wheelhouse, but you also don't really see a whole lot of characters like, yeah, we want somebody to sound like this. And so it's fun playing like Rowan and Kai, which are very different characters in the same franchise.
And this was another cool one based off physical appearance, but Ashigumo and Sakuna.
Yeah, he was cool. Another like very chill, I don't want to say emotionless, but just very calm, sort of that like steady on attitude. He was fun to play. I kind of wish I had gotten a little bit more of him, because I think there was a lot more to be explored there, but Sakuna has stuff to collect, so we got to get on with the story.
And then what was your experience on Arcane?
Arcane was cool. I didn't expect, Theorem was kind of like a surprise. Like I had been doing other work on the series with the team at Riot that didn't make it into the final cut of anything. And then like all of a sudden one day they're like, hey, we want you to play this guy named Theorem. He's got this weird scene with Jinx. And so yeah, that was fun. And it was a fun scene to see done. Especially since going in, like I really didn't have a concept of like the art direction so much of what was happening. And it turned out to be a really unique, interesting series and a fun scene, like a really fun scene.
Mm-hmm. Are you still doing VeggieTales too?
The show, I believe we completed the season, and I don't know if we're filming another season yet. So I don't know that I can answer that. I don't know. I'm assuming I'm not done, because those characters, if we're going to make another season, like those characters are everywhere, like Dr. Flurry's and all like a ton of episodes, just kind of guiding the veggies. So yeah, we'll see. VeggieTales is it's a fun series to work on. It's goofy. It's cool. Cartoons are fun.
Is there anything else that's upcoming that you're part of that you can safely talk about? Or
most of the time, no. I got a couple convention appearances happening that, like, as things warm up, I'm going to Transformers Con this weekend for Bumblebee.
Okay.
And then Avox is happening in July, which is like going to be a really interesting experience, because it's kind of like the anti-con in a weird way. They're making it like an experience with actors that's very different. It's not so much like, okay, here's a panel, now here's an autograph table, now here's a panel. It's going to be a lot of really interesting experiences. So that's some stuff that's coming up that I'm excited about. As far as like roles being announced, no.
Okay.
I can't talk about anything. That's the nature of the beast, man.
My final question then is always asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
I don't know. Like, a legacy is a broad term for the impact you leave, and there are lots of ways to leave it. You don't have to leave a legacy. I don't need to invent a different kind of airplane, or like cure cancer or something like that, or like be the next Troy Baker to leave a legacy, right? The legacy I leave can be in the pictures my kids have of our family, like of me being a dad. The legacy I leave could be, what I do in a small community that nobody ever hears about. So I don't know. I think I'd like to paint a broad brush and do a little bit of everything, but what a shocker. I want to do a little bit of everything.
Well, is there something that you want people to take away from your performances so far too?
The only thing that I always talk about, again, about storytelling is that it's all about perspective. If I've given you a different perspective than you had when you went in, if you feel like you can fill somebody else's, but walk a mile in their shoes just a little bit, if you feel like you can walk 8 inches in their shoes and you couldn't before, then I don't know, I feel like I've done my job. And that's what stories do for us. They expand our point of view. You can learn academically about someone who is not you all damn day, but until you experience it in a story, you don't really get it. I hope I help people get it.
And has there been like a, I don't know, single piloted fan story of how a role of yours helped them in some way?
Now I can't remember the particular role it was, but oh, that bums me out, because it was a character that had a lot going on with his mom, like his relationship with his mom. And a fan reached out and was like, hey, I lost my mom last month, kind of unexpectedly. And your character's journey with their mom and kind of dealing with that really helped me get through it. Thank you. And that's just, like one of many moments of like random notes I get from people. And they're all fantastic. They're all magic, It's the way the universe works.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that we got to do this.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It was good talking to you.
Yeah, you as well.
Take care, man.